Welcome to the Resiliency Project. Here we bring you great stories around resilience and reinvention. This is exactly the kinds of stories that we found people really need to hear during these very difficult COVID-19 times. I'm Teddy Katz, and I'm joined by my co-host, PJ Kwong. PJ is not only a great communications professional, she's also my co-host for the Resiliency Project. We kind of thought about this idea together because we thought there's these great stories out there. These are the stories people need to hear more of. And, PJ, I got to tell you a funny story from this week. My daughter goes to McGill University in Montreal. She had a friend reach out, a friend named Darian at McGill, who said, I was watching the stories called The Resiliency Project. There's a host with the same last name as you, Sophie is my daughter's name. This guy named Katz hosts these stories, and they're the kinds of stories that I really need to hear right now. They're so inspiring and exactly the tonic that I need during these very difficult times. So PJ, we're doing something right.
Well, do you know what's so great about social media is that when it works, it truly is social, and you just have no idea whose life you're going to impact, whose thoughts you're going to be able to sort of really influence. So good for you, Teddy. You have always wanted to do this, and you are the perfect man to do it. So I am thrilled to be involved.
Well, thank you, PJ. Thanks for being part of this. And Darian, if you're watching, we want to hear your questions. We hope you'll give us some ideas for others you want to hear more stories from. And PJ, I have a question for you. When you think ahead, in addition to doing the communications work you do, you also are a public address announcer at different events. In fact, that's where we met, at the Olympics in Beijing, where you were the rink announcer for one of the venues there.
Fencing at that one.
What will you do about Tokyo next year if there's no vaccine for COVID-19? Will you go?
It's a very complicated question. And I talk to my other event friends all the time about sort of where are we at with this, because even if like an event goes on, and I'm booked for other events all the way through to 2022. But, I've got other things to consider. I mean, I don't feel particularly at risk for COVID-19, but as I've mentioned before, I've got my 93-year-old ex-mother-in-law living with me, whose health, she's in very good health, very robust health for a woman of her age, but nevertheless, she's part of that at-risk population. So, I've been to 9 Olympic Games. Could I skip one if I wasn't sure that I'd come back healthy? Maybe I could, but I haven't really made any final decision yet. And I just know that there are way bigger brains than mine that are working on this whole thing.
Well, if you think about it, when we worked together at the Pan Am Games and Para-Pan Am Games in Toronto, we went through all these case scenarios. What happens if this? What happens if that happens? And I'm sure they're doing the exact same thing in Tokyo. And the International Paralympic Committee, the International Olympic Committee is doing the same thing, as are the athletes. And today, one of those athletes is going to talk to us a little bit about this same predicament that I'm sure she's thinking about when she thinks ahead to Tokyo. The athlete's name is Alison Levine. Alison, if you don't know her story, it's an incredible story full of twists and turns. The journey to the Tokyo Paralympics is very interesting, as you're going to hear today. Some might actually call Alison the definition of resilience, and we're going to delve into that and hear why. Alison competes, PJ, in the mixed gender sport of boccia, and she's hoping to make history in Tokyo at the Paralympics to become the first woman to ever win a Paralympic gold in her category, which is called the BC4 category. I want to welcome Alison Levine from her home in Montreal to the Resiliency Project. Alison, welcome.
Hi, glad to be here. Thanks.
Well, thank you for taking the time today to talk to us and to share your story. Let me start, Alison. The first question I like to ask everybody is, how has COVID-19 impacted your life?
Well, I think, like everyone, it's completely turned my life upside down. Every aspect has been affected by COVID. Thankfully and luckily, I've been healthy, and my teammates have been healthy, and everyone that I know and love has been healthy. But everything from just my daily routine to doing what I do, which is training as an elite athlete, has been put on hold and changed. And hoping for it to get back to normal as soon as possible.
Teddy, before you go on, there's a very important comment here from someone who believes in Alison's ability. Same last name, so I'm wondering about her ability to get that medal.
I think that's my mom.
Alison,
God love moms.
Alison, tell me about your mom, because I saw yesterday, we talk about COVID-19 and its impact. I saw yesterday, I follow you on your Instagram account, and you had a post about your mom that was quite special. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, my mom, she's an incredible woman. You say that I'm the kind of the picture of resilience, but I definitely get it from her. First of all, she's a remarkable woman. She's a nurse and also works part-time as my performance partner. In Boccia, we have each athlete has a performance partner. So 3 days a week, she would be training with me on court, spending every single vacation day and leave of absence without pay from work to travel the world with me and help me accomplish my goals. Obviously not training right now. She's been working more as a nurse and pitching in as much as she can to help during this situation. And from going to seeing her at minimum 3-4 days a week, I haven't had any physical contact with her for over 3 months. It's been hard, and I always said that the thing that I miss most is just giving her a big hug. So Super Mom does what she always does and built herself a hugging suit out of garbage bags and met me outside my apartment, we were both masked up, and she threw this, it was 32 degrees outside, but she dressed herself in garbage bags and gave me just that super mom hug that everyone needs once in a while. And that just speaks to who she is.
You probably needed that now more than ever.
Definitely, for sure. Yeah.
When I asked PJ the question about Tokyo and perhaps Tokyo happening next year without the vaccine, how much does that go through your mind? How much of a concern is that for you?
To be completely honest, I'm not thinking about it. As someone with a degenerative disability, I've learned to live my life really day by day. I'm not someone who really plans ahead, or even this sounds kind of weird considering I'm an athlete. I don't make, really objective goals for myself, just because I know that things can change in an instant. So thinking about whether or not the Paralympics will go on in July 2021, that's over a year from now. So what I've learned to do as someone who has to take things day by day and as an athlete is focus on the things that I can control. So while I have absolutely zero control over the situation of what may or may not happen, I'm not going to waste my energy worrying or stressing about that. But what I can control is preparing myself for if they do happen, which is training as much as I can within my apartment, staying healthy, and continuing to do what I can so that if they go ahead, I will hopefully be able to reach the top of the podium. And if they don't go ahead, it's only a 3-year wait to the next one.
That's a great attitude, by the way. And you talk to a lot of elite athletes, and they say that's the way they get to the success they have, by blocking out all of those things that are kind of noise. And it is a lot of noise right now. But given underlying medical conditions that you have, does it at least cause, in terms of COVID-19, does it cause you more worries than the average person might?
Definitely. I'm considered in the vulnerable, if not extremely vulnerable population. So this virus is something that we've been taking extra carefully. Training has actually resumed at the Institut National de Sport, so the National Training Center in Quebec for high performance athletes. But someone like myself won't be starting back if things continue as they're going, which seems to be a good proper progression. I still won't be starting back till the end of July even. That's because we really need to make sure that everything is put in place to make sure that I can train safely as possible for me and the rest of my teammates as well. And while restrictions are being lifted across the provinces, I'm still considered like completely isolating, just because it would be too risky for me if I were to catch the virus. So
if you get a common cold, it can be problematic for you, right? That's what you were telling me.
yeah, exactly. Any respiratory illness for me is something that could become very dangerous very quickly. So something like COVID, which is giving a lot of problems to people that are in perfect shape, would be really scary if I were to get it. So.
Before you guys go on, this is a great comment coming in from the audience. Just to know that you're changing minds for people. Listening to Alison, focus on what you can control is my takeaway so far. Jose Lanouette, beautiful comment.
And that's been a big part of your career, has it not? As you were saying, Alison, it's been, focus on what you can, what you can actually do something about.
Yeah, and actually, that's something that I've had to learn and train actually as an athlete, because to be completely honest, I'm pretty terrible at it. I'm someone who is not really good with like the unexpected and change, and learning to control things that I cannot control was one of my weaknesses at the beginning when I started boccia, and I'd say I've definitely progressed. But it's definitely always a work in progress for me too, because it's so easy to get caught up in the what if. And honestly, it just takes too much energy.
Have you been able to do any kind of training in your house, in your apartment?
Yeah, I mean, the service dog Gia likes to get in the way. So she doesn't mind getting hit by boccia balls apparently. But it's a little complicated because of my level of disability. I normally have a performance partner with me who picks up the balls, sets up game situations, and helps me with drills. My dad was able to build me like a cool ball picker-upper device, which works, but it's still not the best. So if it takes me a minute to throw all my balls, it's going to take me 2 or 3 minutes to pick them all up. So my volume of training has gone down substantially, and I'm not able to do any of the game situations like setting up drills. But speaking with different coaches and performance technicians, they've reminded me that as long as I throw a few hundred balls a week, the muscle memory is going to stay there. And when I get back onto the court, it may take 2 weeks for me to get back, maybe a few months to get back in 100% capacity. But my body's not going to forget how to throw boccia balls. The strategy is still there. I'm still able to do all my other training, so even more so, like deep breathing exercises, watching videos, so doing video analysis and reviews, and working on those other more technical aspects of the game, which are equally important considering boccia is a very strategic game.
And have you done, you've told me before that you do a lot of visualizing. Have you done more of that? And what do you see when you're visualizing? You see yourself?
Pretty much, yeah, I can play games just by closing my eyes. Sometimes it's reliving moments by watching a video of myself during competition, and then kind of closing my eyes and think about, okay, what would I have done differently in that situation, and seeing it play out. And then sometimes I can literally just, I don't know, close my eyes and think, okay, I'm playing against this player from this country. I know normally, that person's style, what they're going to do. And I'll go through a whole game in my through a whole match in my mind, pretty much. And picturing as well, putting myself in uncomfortable situations in my own head where, okay, I had a bad first ball, and then he nailed the jack, and then I missed an explosion. Okay, I'm down to 4 balls. He's nice and confident. Get myself feeling stressed, and then kind of calm myself down. So it's obviously not the same, but it's better than nothing.
You like to wear, you're telling me you like to wear red shoes, gives you a bit of luck maybe. Do you see yourself in those red shoes with a maple leaf flag around your neck or on the medal podium? Do you take the visualization to that extent?
Actually, when I visualize, I don't see myself. I see through my own eyes. But definitely, if I'm competing, the red shoes are going to be there. They just have to be.
Tell us about your event. For those who are uninitiated in boccia, what exactly is BC4, and explain a little bit the sport that for people who may not know it as well as you do.
Yeah, so firstly, I'll say that don't worry if you haven't heard about it. Most people haven't, but everyone should because it is really a beautiful, beautiful sport. So firstly, I'll say that if you know pétanque or Boccia Ball, it's a very similar game to that. It's a precision target sport. that involves 6 red balls, 6 blue balls, and 1 white ball, the jack, which is the target ball. In simple terms, your main objective is to get as many as your colored balls closest to the jack than your opponent's ball after 4 ends have been played. So everyone in Paralympic sport is classified, no matter what sport they play. And classification is a process that kind of rates athletes on their level of disability so that they play against people with the same level of disability of them. So you're not going to have someone who's missing a hand swimming against someone who's a complete quadriplegic. That just wouldn't be fair. So boccia is a sport that was created for people with the most severe level of disability. So pretty much in order to be classified for boccia, you wouldn't be able to really participate in any other of the sports. So I can't be in a manual wheelchair playing wheelchair basketball, rolling around on the court. So I became eligible for boccia when I stopped being able to play wheelchair rugby. And there are 4 categories. BC 1 and 2 are for people with cerebral palsy of varying degrees. BC 3 is a category where they play with a ramp and a sports assistant, so they have no movement whatsoever. And they use a head pointer to propel the ball down the ramp. And then BC 4 is actually the newest category. It was created for people that have full body disability other than cerebral palsy. So in my case, I have a neuromuscular disorder, which is the case for most of the people in my category, as well as high-level quadriplegics and people with arthrogryposis.
Now, you became number 1 ranked in your event, I think in October, if I'm not mistaken. What would it mean for you? I mentioned off the top, you could make history as the first woman to win this event at the Paralympics. What kind of message do you think that would send to young girls in Canada, but also around the world?
Yeah, I mean, I actually haven't thought so much about it being the first time, a female has won a medal in the category at the Paralympics. But I mean, I have, I guess, broken the record or whatever it is. It's the first time a female has reached number 1 in the world in my category. For me, it's a huge sense of accomplishment, and I'm quite proud to be able to say that because it still is a very male-dominated sport, as most sports are. Especially, I mean, even if you look at kids' leagues for different sports, there's always, I think, like 3-1 or 5-1 boys outnumber the girls. And I think I can send that message to girls at any level, showing that even if you are in a mixed gender sport, we have our own advantages. We have our own. Yes, we're competing against guys, but it doesn't make a difference. It only makes a difference if you believe that there is a difference between us, and really there isn't. So when you're feeling intimidated because you are different and singled out because, and maybe even picked on because you're the girl on the team, just know that it's possible to get to the top.
That's so cool and inspiring, I'm sure, for a lot of young girls out there. I mentioned off the top, Alison, that if people are looking for a definition of resilience, they might actually look you up in the dictionary and your story. And I wanted you, if you could, I mentioned following you on Instagram. You had a really interesting post at the end of the decade. I think it was in December, which seems like 8 years ago already, but it's only a few months.
Yeah.
Marking the end of the decade. I wonder if you could read that for us.
Yeah, sure. It was just something that I was lying in bed and started reflecting and wrote this out. The end of a decade. In the span of a decade, I've lost my ability to walk, stand, sit unassisted, or even hold my head up against gravity. In the span of a decade, I threw my first boccia ball, won countless medals, represented my country, became number 1 in the world, made lifetime friendships, cared deeply for people, grew as a person, was elected to multiple councils, moved into my own apartment, got a service dog, graduated college, and learned to love life. You win some, you lose some. I'll focus on the wins. Here's to another 10 years of love, laughs, tears, failures, and successes.
Wow. When I read that, I was like, I was shocked at how much you had gone through in 10 years.
It was quite a realization for myself as well, actually.
I
Yeah.
bet. I
Yeah.
bet. Can I ask one quick question? I want to talk for a moment, if you don't mind, because you mentioned it, your amazing service dog. Um, could you have imagined the kind of companionship that you've been able to get from a service dog, and having a service dog, what does that mean for you?
Oh man, Gia really came into my life really when I needed her. I was still in college, and my disability was degenerating quite quickly. As you see in the picture, when I got her, I was still only in a manual wheelchair. And I could push myself, but anytime there was any type of ramp or even going up and down the sidewalk cutouts, I really couldn't get myself up, and I kind of always needed someone with me to help me. And then in came Gia with her special harness that was able to pull me up and down hills like 30 kilometers an hour, no sweat.
Wow.
It was just really life-changing and gave me full independence to go anywhere I wanted, anytime, and helped me get from building to building in college. And they, at the Mira Foundation, they were incredible, knowing that because my condition was going to change, they didn't just train her for what I needed, they trained her what I would need in the future. So now she doesn't pull me in my chair anymore because it's a motorized wheelchair, but she picks up everything that I drop, which is constantly, because I'm always dropping things. She's pushing the buttons for the automatic doors, because more often than not, actually, the buttons for the accessible doors, you can't actually reach them if you're in a wheelchair. And she can help me with my transfers, so I can do all that independently in my apartment. She barks if I need help, and in general as well, she's just always there for me. Everyone who has a pet knows about the unconditional love. And it's going to be her birthday. She'll be 10 in a week or so. But she's still in perfect shape, happy to be with me. Snoozing more than ever, because she's getting a little old, but I love her to death.
Alison, can you walk us back to when you first started noticing? You talked about those early days with the dog, and sort of helping you through some of that when you started to have some of these issues that you were having with your body. Can you walk us through? You've shared that with me in the past, sort of how difficult that experience was when you first started having some issues and you were trying to figure out what the heck was going on, and the response that you got from the medical community.
Yeah, well, actually, originally my symptoms started when I was around the age of 12. Now looking back, we could see signs when I was even younger that I had an issue, but nothing that would have really brought us to a doctor's appointment in urgency. But I started having a limp on just my right leg and muscle weakness when I was around 12 years old. And they thought that I just had, they did some tests and they saw that the nerve wasn't working well. And they figured, oh, you just had some nerve damage. It happens to some people and you'll get over it. But I didn't. And eventually the other legs started being affected too. And then my arms and my hands, and gradually lost more and more function. But I was able to walk for a long time, whether it was just with one brace or with crutches, and then two braces, no crutches. And it was during that time that the doctors couldn't figure out exactly what was wrong with me. And there was a few missed tests and a few doctors that maybe had already a preconceived idea in their mind and managed to convince other doctors that my problem was a psychosomatic disorder, so that it was a psychological problem, and
something in your head.
Exactly, and that if I really, wanted to walk, there was something psychologically blocking me from walking. So their treatment for me was to be in mental health institutions, and I would have my crutches taken away from me and pretty much told, well, if you need to walk, you will walk. Obviously that didn't happen and I never walked. When I turned 18 years old and switched to the adult system, I said goodbye to the medical community and I said, I want to live my life. I don't care if this is a psychological problem. I don't care if it is a physical problem. Just, I've had enough being sick and I want to live my life in a good way, in a bad way. when I really deteriorated eating even more and it started affecting my breathing, that's when I decided to go back to see a doctor. And it was a doctor that really realized, well, you know what, psychologically, you can't have your diaphragm not function. That just doesn't work. So there's a real issue here. They finally did some more tests. And after another few years and specialists, they were able to pinpoint this extremely rare neuromuscular disorder, kind of giving me that vindication that I always knew. But being able to finally say, yes, this is physical, and it sucks. But
on the other hand, you know what you're dealing
that's
with.
the past. That's life now. That's in the past, and let's make up for it.
You talked about sport and sport playing a big role in your life. You mentioned different sports that you were part of, but early on, I think you told me you were doing horseback riding.
Yeah, I started horseback riding as a therapy, actually, like physical therapy, and it's what gave me total freedom. Being on the horse, you suddenly have no physical disability whatsoever, so that was great.
And tell me the extent that you went, because you did compete.
I did.
And you also tried to hide your disability, you told me.
I didn't. I didn't want any unfair advantage. So it was a type of horseback riding where you would be like in a ring and they would give you different commands and you would have to do them. And we didn't want the judges to know that I had a disability because I didn't want them picking me as the winner because, oh, look at the poor disabled girl on the horse, right? So we would throw me up onto the horse behind the barn before it was time to compete. And in order for my feet to stay in the stirrups, my mom would wrap them onto the stirrups with elastic bands, which she would actually carefully color black with a Sharpie so that they would blend in with my boots. And then I would go into the ring and ride around like everyone else. And then someone would kind of pull me off the horse afterwards, and I'd go on my business with my crutches. And I think after the competition was over, sometimes the judges would see me with my crutches behind the barn, and they'd be like, wait, did you just compete? And I'm like, oh yeah, I did.
That's pretty amazing. So you go from that, you start, I think your conditions started getting worse. So you started having to do other sports, wheelchair rugby, I think you mentioned, wheelchair basketball, and now eventually you get to boccia. You start getting really good in boccia, but then you were telling me a story about how you almost got too good, and then you had trouble dealing with that a couple of years ago. I wonder if you could tell our watchers or our audience about that. What happened?
It's hard to say exactly, but I think my journey throughout sports has just kind of happened. I've never really planned any of it out. Even the way I found boccia was just like randomly, it just happened to happen. And then someone told me to show up to a training camp, and they, put me on the provincial team. And then I went to nationals, and they put me on the national team. And throughout the whole process, I was just kind of like, oh, okay, I'll go where they tell me to go. I'll do what they tell me to do. I enjoy what I'm doing. I'm having fun. And then suddenly I was considered one to watch and was really good and winning medals. And I guess that kind of became, for me, a sense of motivation to do well and to do better. But it also became scary. Suddenly there's people, you're not just, another one of every competition, there's like 100 athletes or so. You're not just one of the 100. People know you and people know your name. And when an athlete is going to play against you, they may be intimidated, which right before then, I was the one intimidated by other players. And suddenly the tables have turned. And when you're playing a game, people are coming to your court to watch you. And it kind of puts a spotlight on you, which some people really thrive in that environment. And I think for a while, for I guess a good 6 months, kind of had a negative impact on me in that it felt like I had to, I guess, prove myself and show others, oh yeah, okay, you're going to be watching me. I'll show you why you should watch me. I can do this. I can do this. But it was scary. But I learned to take that attention and I guess use it in a different way, in that if it wasn't for me becoming, number one in the world, or beforehand when I was, top 10 in the world, or first female in the world, it opened up all these opportunities, such as things like this, and being invited to media summits, and being elected to the Canadian Paralympic Committee Athletes Council, and being a voice for athletes, and being a voice for women in sport and people with disabilities. So if I take myself away from the sports part and thinking of the whole, people are expecting things of me, I get to think about the other positive sides as a more well-rounded person of what I've been able to become and do because of my success.
When I mentioned you being the definition of resilience, I'm curious what that word means to you.
Well, I kind of get a picture in my head, and it's those. I don't want. First of all, I don't want anyone to think that I don't have the bad days, because the bad days are there, and I acknowledge those bad days. Sometimes those days are weeks, and I've had periods in my life where I've had full years that have been bad, and months that have been bad, and it's those times when you are literally in bed and you do not have any reason whatsoever to get up, and you feel that if I get up, it's just going to be terrible. So curl up with the blanket over your head and you don't move. For me, resiliency is that moment when you feel those things, but you get up anyways.
And what's the big lesson that you can maybe share with others that you've learned in terms of, how do you get your energy when somebody might say, it's the odds are stacked against me, I don't want to get out of bed. What's the one key piece of advice that you'd have for them in terms of how you overcome those kinds of things?
I guess it's really finding the smallest little thing that makes you happy during the day. Searching for those little moments. In my case, a pat on the head of the dog. For anyone else, calling a loved one, watching a TV show you like, just the little mundane things, finding those good and building on that. And, eventually everything does settle down. Eventually things get better. As horrific and terrible as things always seem in the moment, 5 years from them, you'll always look back and feel like things did get better.
Alison, before we let you go today, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, you mentioned about being a voice, being on the Athletes Council, being a voice for athletes or people with disabilities. I'm just curious, there's been a lot of talk, and for all the right reasons, a lot of talk and important conversations around anti-racism initiatives and the kinds of actions that we need to take for a more inclusive, more diverse society. I'm curious, we talked about this before in terms of diversity and inclusion and making sure that people with disabilities are well represented in our society as well. I'm just curious what you think we still need to do on that front. I mean, we could actually spend the whole show on this subject.
Yeah. Well, personally, I think it is my duty as someone who's becoming more and more frequent in the media. I think it's my responsibility as an athlete with a disability, and even just as a person with a disability, to use every opportunity that comes my way to put myself out there. Because the more the world sees people with disabilities, the more normalized it becomes. The more that I can speak for myself and advocate for myself, the more people are going to listen. So when for example, if I'm out with my friend in a shopping mall and someone starts talking to my friend instead of to me, and I simply say to them, well, you can ask me, those are things that are going to become second nature. I refuse to sit back and be invisible because I have a disability. I don't want people, I don't mind the questions that people ask me as long as they're done respectfully. Please come up to me, ask me questions, obviously, to a certain limit, but it just needs to be more in TV shows and in the news and just exposure, so that people aren't viewing people with disabilities as a burden or pitying us or thinking that we have hard, terrible lives, because personally, I don't. My life is awesome.
I have one quick question, and it comes from my coaching background because I coached for like a quadrillion years. What are the 3 qualities that you possess that make you such a strong competitor?
Oh, I think I'm stubborn, which most people in the sports world would call determination, but I'm going to go with stubborn.
Okay.
I'm a perfectionist, so I will do something over and over and over until I get it right. And I'm adaptable. When things aren't working, I will find a solution until I get it, until I find the way to do something. Yeah.
That's amazing. From a coaching standpoint, that's perfect.
Well, Alison, we want to thank you for taking the time today to join us here on the Resiliency Project. I know you got a busy day ahead of you. You've got other appointments you got to get to, but we really appreciate you taking the time, sharing some of your stories, some of your journey, some of your great lessons, and we really wish you all the best of luck on the journey to Tokyo next year. Hope to see you there. Hope to see you on the medal podium, and I hope to be there with you. Both PJ and I hope to be there in person as well. So thanks again for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Alison Levine again.